A quorum, we can get started because we have a lot of business to attend to for the Committee of the Whole. So I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, August the 13th. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Okay. We're going to win anyway.
And you got your bottle of Listerine over there?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, calling the roll. Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Germana. Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher is absent this evening. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Here. Mr. Jones. Mr. Rogers. Here. Ms. Simon. Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Here. And Ms. Conley.
Here.
There's a quorum.
I entertain the motion to mark Mr. Gallagher's absence as excused.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we mark Mr. Gallagher excused. Everybody else should be in here eventually. Has anyone signed in for public comment related to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, quite a few people, actually. If everyone, when your name is called, come up to the podium, make sure the green light is on so that means the microphone is working, and address council and state your name, please, for the record. The first person is Ken Fogel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fogel. And if those who are going to speak kind of line up so that it saves a couple of minutes walking up time. Good afternoon. You may proceed.
How you doing?
Good, thank you.
I'm Ken Fogel with Fogel Stenzel Architects, and we're the architects for Welcome House Incorporated that's interested in the purchase of the Archives building. And I was primarily going to try and give you a summary of what we intend to do with it if you should grant to sell it to Welcome House. We looked at 4 or 5 buildings with Welcome House trying to find appropriate housing for approximately 24 people who are in need of supportive services on top of being available for open market housing. And Welcome House is a nonprofit, and they'll speak to you later to give you their understanding of what they do. But I wanted to tell you about the Rhodes building, which is of the 2 buildings, the one that we're first looking at for accommodating 24 apartment units for single persons who are young persons who have aged out of the mental health system for foster care and are now on the open market, so to speak, for housing, but still need supportive services. And we're looking at, as much as we can, we'd like to preserve the Rhodes House, which is the front portion of the building, which will primarily serve as support services offices and training space and meeting space. And then the rear portion of the building, which was originally built as a children's detention center, lends itself very well to reconfiguring for apartments. It has double-loaded corridors, 3 stories. Lower story, which appears to be basement from the street, is actually at grade in the rear portion of the building. And we can accommodate 25 units in there, and that's what they're trying to serve. And it'll be a mix of units with efficiencies, 1 bedrooms, and a few 2 bedrooms for persons who may have a child or may have a partner. There'll be minimal parking demands because the majority, or all of the residents would not be persons who drive or own a car, primarily use public transit. And Welcome House will have on-site supportive services. The rear portion of the building, we're going to preserve the primary structure and the bearing walls that work down through the middle of the building, but we will be reconfiguring between that double-loaded corridor into apartment units. And we'll be doing energy upgrades and full systems upgrades to that portion of the building. There are no immediate plans for the Sanford House, though it allows the expansion for additional in the future as this program develops. No changes to the site beyond providing handicapped access to a centralized entry area on the west side of the 2 buildings. Other than that, the parking we would have remain the same because we don't need any more. And the large open lot to the west that has developed into a park area with large trees would remain as it is. That's the overview of what our intended use is, and would probably suggest it would be appropriate to have Welcome House share with you what their services are and what they do through Tony Thomas, if that could be appropriate, and ask him to speak to you next. Answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fogel.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Rick Ferran, and then after Mr. Ferran is Dennis Mylod.
Good afternoon. Rick Ferran, obviously, with Ferran Group Development. We submitted a proposal to the county, and that proposal was, again, this is for the county archive building. That proposal was given the highest scoring in the review process by about, I believe it was 78 to 71 points. We were preferred. Afterwards, there was an interview process, and we attended that interview and made a rather decent presentation, I would think. But we found out later that a lot of the scoring did not reflect accurately what had happened there. For example, it says here that we did not supply letters from the bank. We have lined up our financing with not one but two banks. Of course, we can't finalize that until we have control of the property, or some sort of commitment from you folks. Here I have two letters, one from First Merit.
We have those.
Okay.
materials.
So secondly, we have endorsements from Ohio City Local Development Corporation, et cetera. So we had good support there. We additionally, the comments were made that Ohio City is not a good area for market rate housing, and other rather derogatory comments, which I think were in error, but as a result, this whole process ended up sinking our proposal by about 2 points. I would ask that you take a fresh look at this whole process, take a fresh look at our proposal. We had a higher bid on the acquisition. We had no contingencies. I believe our proposal was for $725,000. The competing proposal was for $650,000, $50,000 of which was to be given back to the developers, set aside for improvements to the building. So I believe we had a very aggressive, competitive, and honest proposal, which I think has great support in the community there. And we would ask that you take a fresh look at this competition and our proposal before making the final award. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fryan.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Mylod from Greystone Properties, and just wanted to take this opportunity to thank this board and its representatives for the consideration given to us to date on the county expansion and archives project. We appreciate the kind consideration and look forward to hopefully continuing that project with you folks. We've had the opportunity to offer services and be of tenancy to the Board of Elections and also Children and Family Services at our project, or our building at the old Halley Brothers building at 40th Street. And again, just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for the past experience being able to deal with you, and look forward to additional opportunities in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Aaron Marks, and after Mr. Marks is Glenn Billington.
Hello. Thank you for hearing from me. I'm actually a resident of Ohio City. I live directly behind the proposed project. I think it's important for me to just start by saying I'm absolutely not opposed to Welcome House as an organization. There's been a lot of rhetoric around this project, and both ends, and a lot of misinformation, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come here, to kind of hear what everybody was saying. I did have the opportunity to look at Mr. Ferran's proposal as well as the Welcome House proposal. And just speaking, again, as a resident who has invested in the community, who has made a decision to move into the city of Cleveland when a lot of people are moving out of the city of Cleveland, I will let you know that one of the biggest priorities for people who are moving into the city is market rate apartments. We want to be surrounded by more people moving into the city. When I first heard about the Fran project, I got very excited because I'm thinking, okay, you have more feet on the street, more people being active, you know, the neighborhood is developing, there are new things happening all the time. And I think that, you know, his idea of expanding into potential townhouses was a very good idea. And again, I just felt like I saw an email this morning knowing that you guys were here, and I just wanted to let you know, as a person who works, lives, and has invested in the city, and pretty much everyone that I have talked to who lives in Ohio City, minus maybe 1 or 2 people, the residents support the apartments. Again, I have absolutely nothing against Welcome House. I actually do a lot of volunteering for children nonprofits, and I would even venture to say that I would volunteer for you guys. You know, and I just think that this specific property is almost begging for apartments. So that's just my opinion, and I wanted to share it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Good afternoon, Mr. Billington.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Billington, but I'd like to yield to Tony Thomas first because he's going to speak to the substance of the use by Welcome House.
Okay, is he signed in? So,
Yes.
all right, come on.
Let
Try
him
to
go
take him out of
first.
order, that's fine.
Mine is a technical issue.
Okay.
Madam Chair, while Mr. Thomas is getting situated, I wanted to recognize council members Germana and Jones have joined the meeting.
And give us your name again, sir.
Tony Thomas, Executive Director, Welcome House. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everybody again. Thank you, County Council, for the opportunity to serve county residents with developmental disabilities in a very historic building in an equally historic part of the city. I want to thank Dan Rosa Realtor for helping guide us in the direction of looking at the Archives building as a potential project. We have been looking extensively for an apartment building to replicate a project that we've done in Lakewood, Ohio. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We have a great team in place. Jen Wintner, Ken Fogel, Wayne and Barbie Lachiever from White House Construction, a great team of people, and also led by a very capable board of trustees, and Nick Alexander, who's our president of our board, who's here today. You hopefully will be selling this county property to an agency that's part of the history of people with developmental disabilities within Cuyahoga County. We are a longstanding partner of the County Board of DD, and we have support of their new CEO, Kelly Connor Petty. We're an agency that supports 160 people with developmental disabilities, 315 dedicated staff who are dedicated to the mission of the organization, 32 homes and facilities across Cuyahoga County. Our reach is broad, and we cover the entire county. The apartment building that we're proposing to create within Ohio City is similar and almost identical to the one that we currently operate in Lakewood, Ohio. And the support for that particular apartment building in Lakewood, Ohio came from then Mayor Fitzgerald and then Planning Director Nate Kelly, who helped support that particular project in Lakewood, Ohio that supports 16 people with developmental disabilities, and you cannot tell it from one apartment to another. We appreciated their support then, and we appreciate the support now. We'll take the same approach to the Archives building. This building and its old and ancient records will be converted to the state-of-the-art apartment building and serve a very important segment of the developmental disability population. Mr. Fogel mentioned that it might serve children. It's not serving children. It's serving youth who are transitioning from the county Department of Children and Family Services who have developmental disabilities who need long-term supported housing. We will hire and do the same thing that we do in Lakewood, hire the best staff to work with them. We'll meet their needs head on, and we will never blame them or help them feel guilty for the behaviors that they present to us. That's what we commit. The modern agency of today that's providing social services has 3 things to think about in this arrangement. One is vision, and the vision is to look beyond the next 5 years and see what the challenges are and see where we take the agency to meet that need. The second is risk. The risk is very important, and I need to mention it to you today because the risk is that for everything that we do now, the funding, the resources, the opportunities are shrinking. The concept of sequestration is real. It's taking its toll on funding for housing projects for people with developmental disabilities, people with mental health, and everything else. And finally, the third concept and the third pillar is second-generation thinking. We were the ones that created one of the very first group homes for people with developmental disabilities in 1981. And today, we will take the second generation and serve those youth that are coming forward that have needs and serve them in the community in the best possible way. The Archives building is called to us. We didn't find it, it called us. It was the home for children with developmental disabilities in the late 1960s. It served as the first home for the County Board of DD. If it has ghosts, they're good ones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Billington?
Again, my name is Glenn Billington. I'm the attorney for Welcome House. I've been asked to advise Welcome House as to the Fair Housing Acts of the United States and the state of Ohio with respect to the proposed purchase and development of the former County Archives building. These acts and the court decisions interpreting them make it explicitly clear that persons with disabilities cannot be denied the opportunity to live in housing appropriate for them because of their disabilities. As you have heard and will hear from other witnesses, the proposed residents are each young adults with developmental disabilities transitioning from county-sponsored foster care to this very well-supervised and supportive environment. These needs will be met in cooperation with the case management services of the highly respected County Board of Developmental Disabilities. After going through the process mandated by the county, Welcome House offer to purchase this building has been scored at the highest and best offer. The timing of the available financing of this project, which includes a complete renovation, which you've heard about, is dependent upon the prompt action in this matter. If we don't move forward today, then we lose an opportunity to have the financing. Any delay may be very damaging, and we accept the responsibility to educate the larger community. But as you heard alluded to, there has been quite some amount of negative commentary about this proposed use based on the disabilities of the individuals. That in and of itself, if that becomes the reason to delay this project, would be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Billington. Anyone else?
Yes, Madam Chair. The final two speakers are David Ellison and then Nick Alexander.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you all again. There's not a day that I don't wake up and thank the people of Cuyahoga County for not electing me executive. So, thank you, and thank you for having this meeting today on the subject of the Archives building. I'm an architect, and I live in Ohio City, not far from the building, and I'm happy to tell you that the bank approved financing for a house that a new house that we're going to be building on Clinton Avenue, just a few blocks away from here, and it's going to be built, at market rates, and it's going to be occupied by people who pay the mortgage on that loan that they're taking out to do it, and it's a huge commitment on their part, and I think we can do better than the proposals we have here. I have no vested interest in how the Archives buildings are changed or developed. I've never talked to either the Welcome House people or the developer who has plans for it. In fact, I haven't even really looked at the project from an architectural point of view, but I just think that we can do better than this and that we should take our time to evaluate the possibilities and the potential for that site. Now, as a resident and a person interested in architectural history, I'm so glad that the county worked with the Western Reserve Historical Society back in the 70s to preserve those two houses. And you know, the empty lot next door is there because the Castle House is not. They tore down another one of the old mansions that was along that strip to create that empty lot. And I don't think these two houses would possibly exist today had the county and the Western Reserve Historical Society and the people who committed themselves to Ohio City to make their home in Ohio City. Those houses wouldn't be there. The house, other than the Sanford house, I think its future is very important. The interior of that house is actually much more intact than the interior of the Rhodes House. Both of these have huge potential, I think, for market rate housing, just from the surface of it. I'd like to see us really explore that idea, and I'd like to have a little bit more time. As a resident of the neighborhood, I know that our block club has been very interested in the property and really wants to talk about it, and we really haven't had that opportunity. I know that representatives from the county had been scheduled several times for community meetings on the subject, and for some reason or another, we haven't really been able to come together and have that community meeting where we can get together and talk about this. I think that should happen. And I think the issue is a little bit more complicated than the kind of superficial sort of issues around the population that might be housed there, or whether it's fair under federal law or something. There's a whole bunch of federal regulations that we should take into consideration. One of which being the concentration of poverty and need, because
you got gonged, but
I'm sorry.
To finish up.
Just one last point. The two census tracts there already have a huge number of people in proportion to the demographics of the rest of the population who are in need and who are on public assistance. It may not even be legal, according to HUD and IRS guidelines, to fund any more publicly assisted housing in that area. We don't know that because we haven't spent the time to actually evaluate this. And I really appreciate you all just slowing down a little bit and letting us, as a community, talk about it a little bit more. Plus, I'm concerned about the fate of the archives themselves.
Thank you. Is your house going to be near Jason Bristol's house?
That's Jason Bristol's house that we just got word from the bank today that they've approved it.
So you're like near or close or?
Well, their house is on Clinton. My house is on the other side of the county archives on Carroll, near St. Ignatius. But
okay.
No, it's all one neighborhood, and it's very exciting that.
Hi, congratulations. We'll have to come see your house.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Alexander.
Good afternoon, distinguished members of council, Mr. County Executive. My name is Nick Alexander. I am the president of the Board of Trustees of Welcome House. I'm also the father of a child with special needs. I'm also the resident of a Cleveland neighborhood that has active, engaged citizens and stakeholders that are part of the process in determining what types of development goes on in the community. I think that's a good sign, that's healthy. We should all want that type of engagement. I think that is the sign of a good, growing community, but I also think the sign of a growing community is one that's inclusive, one that balances market rate housing with various projects like we're proposing today. I can attest to you that Welcome House has a very strong track record at being successful in these types of projects. We have an executive director, a board of directors, and foundation support that can help us execute on this. And I think as you're evaluating proposals, what you should try to align yourself with is the mission of Welcome House and what we will bring to the community. So I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. All right, moving on to matters referred to the committee. Just by way of explanation, we have 3 general areas to discuss this afternoon in the Committee of the Whole. The first are the 2 matters that were referred to this committee, and that is the sale of the archives building, which is item A, and then also the lease agreement with the Halley building for storage. These items, although separate, actually have long-term consequences, and they flow from one another. So if we sell the archives building, then we have to have some place to place the materials, and then the Halley building would be the proposed repository. And that was supposed to be from 2 to 3, so we're a half an hour behind now. Then from 3 to 4, we're supposed to discuss have a presentation from Mr. Applebaum of the Convention Center, and then a Convention Center Hotel, rather. And then from 4 to 5, we'll be going into executive session regarding an executive session. So I'd just like to say that we'll start out with the discussion regarding the sale of the archives. We've already had some comments from the public, so why don't you read that item, Jean? And then the issue that, I will just say this, what we'll have to do is, we will be voting to refer this matter out of committee to the board. So that will be the decision that we have to make. Do we vote it out of committee to go on the regular agenda for final disposition?
Resolution number 2013-0169, a resolution making an award on requisition number 24534 to Welcome House Incorporated in the amount of $650,000 for sale of the county archives building, authorizing a lease for said building in the amount of $12 for a 12-month period commencing on the closing date of said sale, authorizing the county executive to take all necessary actions and to execute all documents necessary to consummate the contemplated transactions, and authorizing the Director of Public Works to administer the project, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay, so you're going to give us a presentation, a brief presentation about the sale. We have the letters, we've given copies of the letters from Mr. Foran, who has raised questions about the process. I think the council would be interested in some information about that process. And then, as I said, the ultimate decision would be to determine the sale. And I think before we vote on one, we should actually discuss both before we vote on them, because they do flow together.
Thank you very, very much for meeting with us today. And if it would be acceptable to the council, I would ask, and I can make our timeline, because I know that that's important. I would ask that that I cover a little bit of information as it regards the consolidated facility, because as you stated, these two projects do flow from one to the other.
Okay, do you want to have Jean read that one then? Why don't you go ahead and read the BM so we'll discuss them together?
Okay.
Resolution number 2013-0170, a resolution making an award on requisition number 24534 to Halley Industrial Park, LLC, in the amount of $10,069,265.64 for lease of space for the period anticipated to be June 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2024, authorizing the county executive to take all necessary actions and to execute all documents necessary to consummate the contemplated transactions, and authorizing the Director of Public Works to administer the project, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay.
So we'll start our discussion today with Initiative 2 of the Cuyahoga County Real Estate Consolidation Project. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties, but I think we solved them in just the nick of time. It's important to talk about both these projects together because, as indicated, the current county archives building located on Franklin Avenue in Ohio City provides a very important service and function to the community. The proposed consolidated facility, which will be a central processing facility for property, furniture, records, and a place really for records to be not only acquired, but to be scanned and also to be archived in the appropriate manner, really is dependent upon the fact that the archives would be housed in this facility. This has been something that's been under analysis for 2.5 years, approximately, the entire project. The county engaged Allegro Realty in 2011 to evaluate not only its office space, but also its storage needs, to evaluate the various buildings that it owns and their suitability for the services that they provide, and drew a number of conclusions back in 2011. In fact, we put the archives building on the market last summer when we announced that we were going to be pursuing 2 consolidated facilities. To that end, there's been extensive research, thought, discussion on the matter. Your team within the county and the administration of Public Works has spent an awful lot of time really looking at this with independent third-party groups to determine what the best strategy would be. And hopefully I don't have to vamp too much longer.
Yeah, we have your handsome face. We don't have anything on the...
Thank you very, very much.
Okay, and a blush.
There we go. So, as we go today, I'm going to be sensitive to the timeline. 3 o'clock, Mr. Applebaum, who is much more exciting than I am, is going to be getting up, and you may see me pass through a couple of slides. Please bear with me. It's information that we will obviously hand over, or if you have any questions, we can go back to, but I don't want to burden you with too many details as we move through this. Number one, let's talk about the Central Processing Center, which is really the new adopted name for this facility. At one time, we called it a storage facility. That was never really accurate. It was just our easy name for it. I want to remind you of the vision that Public Works has of this project. We're going to consolidate functions related to property and document acquisition, retention, and preservation. There are certain efficiencies that can be had when you bring things together in one location. We want to enhance the records retention programs that are already in place with the county. But one of the problems that you have right now is that your many departments have many different needs and requirements. Those have to be met, and at the same time, you have to streamline the aspects of their policies that are similar so that you can preserve and retain documents as necessary. And lastly, we want to streamline and improve the communication and the management of this facility wherever it ends up. It really needs to be governed as one location with a number of departments, rather than a number of departments acting independently of one another, because they do have common functions. Quickly, you've got the Board of Elections, you've got Department of Children and Family Services, Job and Family Services. There is a group that will be purely dedicated to scanning and maintaining the electronic versions of these documents for the future, the Fiscal Scanning and Microfiche Group. There will be some protective services on site, Public Works, and then the county archives themselves. So we've talked about project goals. In fact, last summer when we embarked upon this, we really went through a nice display of the vision for this project. I'm going to move through it a little bit quickly, but really the purpose is to create a welcoming environment, something that your citizens can access, something that is easy to use, provides the space that's necessary, is suitable for the kinds of storage and functions and purposes you'll have in this location. It's not all just about scanning pieces of paper. There's property. There is a very important election cycle and cycles that happen at different times throughout the year that has to run smoothly. It's critical to our government, and it would operate out of this facility. So we issued an RFP last summer. We established a need for about 200,000 square feet to create this facility. We had done an intense program with Allegro. We had continued it with URS, who was engaged as the county's consultant, and they had determined not only the groups that would have to be there, but how they would operate, how they would fit around each other physically, and the kinds of space we'd have to create. I'll move through this. The scoring criteria for this had various categories. You saw this when we went through the decision-making with the headquarters. The biggest category is economics. You know, this is going to be a piece of real estate, and how much it costs you does matter. We also have considerations for the functionality of the facility. And when we got our proposals in, we received seven properties in the area. We quickly narrowed it down to 2, the Halley Industrial Warehouse and Shoreway Commerce Park, which is the old White Motor facility out near East 79th. This is the Halley Industrial Warehouse. The Halley Industrial Warehouse is about a 225,000 square foot facility today. It includes 3 tenants. The county is really the anchor today with Board of Elections. And through the course of previous months, we worked hand in hand with Greystone to really develop a great proposal and solution for the future. A couple of the high points. The landlord's going to be investing over $2 million as an allowance to the county, plus another $100,000 for moving and design expenses. And they're going to be investing more money of their own towards the base building and the sufficiency of the structure. That is a big number for this type of building in Cleveland, Ohio. Just something for us to all be aware of. When you're working with a Class A office building, this would not be a big number. But in this style of facility, where you're creating office space, but you also have functional storage, that is a big number. The average annual occupancy cost that's been determined with your consultants is just over $8 per square foot per year. That would be the average cost of this facility. That's going to include your rent, your operating expenses. It even includes some temporary election cycle expenses that you incur every year. It's going to include the estimated cost of construction. That is a relatively low number in our market, $8 per square foot for this kind of a use. The rent itself is just about $4.77 per square foot. What's important to know in terms of the facility too is that you're not going to be charged for the entire premises you occupy. Some of it, especially in the lower level, would be free of charge. You would have the option to take some additional space that is available in the building. There is the opportunity to shed space in the future if you no longer need it. And at the end of the term and the 2 renewals, because it's a 10-year term plus 2 5-year renewals, there is an option for the county to take title to the building for $1. When we scored this proposal, it scored 95 points. There were 100 total points. Important to remember that, and I've said this before to you, when we score these, it's not necessarily what you're used to with the letter grade scores, 80 to 90 being a B, 90 to 100 being an A. But I will say 95 out of 100, that's a pretty good score. Shoreway Commerce Park was a very good proposal. And I want to make sure that we applaud the group from First Interstate Properties who put this forth. They were very aggressive. The issue that really existed there was that it was too expensive to make the decision towards Shoreway Commerce Park. You have to create the entire space from scratch there. At Halley Industrial Warehouse, a good amount of it exists today, and you don't have to create it all. So in this facility, we actually gave it a score of 95 out of 100. We didn't mean to end up in a tie. We actually tied a couple of times through the process while we were improving proposals from both groups. But ultimately, the county, the executive, Public Works, CBRE is recommending to go with the Halley Industrial Warehouse. It is the lowest overall cost by nearly $2 million over the initial term. You have existing departments in the facility. This would limit your disruption, your cost of construction. One of the big important points that I want to point out has to do with the mutual interest of both the county and the landlord to establish a very defined protocol for communication and maintenance and management of this facility. There have been some challenges in the past, transition of county government, number of people and departments in and out of the facility, where it wasn't always clear who was to be making requests of the landlord and who was to be responding to them at various times and what the priorities were. Public Works, CBRE independently reviewed all the maintenance records with the Board of Elections group to make sure that they were accurate, and will tell you that when notified of issues, Greystone is responsive. Sometimes the communication doesn't always get to Greystone, which has been a challenge, and so we spent a lot of time over the last 6 to 8 months making sure to establish a good protocol and a position within the facility for the county that really will manage that communication. We'll have regular monthly meetings with the ownership and make sure that everything is going well and that the needs of the facility are being met. That's a very important point for you to remember about this facility. It's a standalone, great signage and identity, opportunity for additional space, and you have the opportunity to take title to it for $1 at the end of the lease. Overall, this would be roughly comparable to what you pay for your purely active storage facilities today, but you have to remember that you have about a dozen facilities right now that we are in the process of disposing of that you use as de facto storage, that you pay to maintain, that have boxes, that have property, that will be disposed of through this whole process. They cost you over $2 million a year. A lot of that property will be moving into this facility. And so this ultimately becomes a cost savings to the county. Which takes us to the archives. And you've heard a couple of good comments today. We embarked on this process, CBRE did, last summer to sell a number of buildings, the archives being one of them. We had a big announcement. We had a lot of fanfare. It was very interesting. We were on the news, it was in the paper. And generally speaking, the interest and excitement in this building has been very, very high. We haven't had a lot of people coming to us saying, there's an issue with looking at a sale of this building, because at the time, everybody understood why the building was going to be sold. I want to give you a background of the building, and I want to tell you why the county decided to sell it. The Sanford House, which is just to the east, was built in 1862. The county acquired it in 1924. The Rhodes House, which was built in 1974, was owned by the Rhodes family for roughly 13 years, sold to a German immigrant named John Mekis in 1887, and the county actually bought it in 1914. You've owned it for almost 100 years. And in 100 years, that building has been a juvenile detention home, a nursing home, It's been the Food Stamp and Welfare Department. It's been the offices of the Cuyahoga County Board of MRDD and at an actual school for disabled children. And to present, since 1978, it's been the county archives. In 1978, when it was converted to the archives, the purpose behind it was because the archives function that was actually just created a few years earlier in 1975, the group who was running it realized that they weren't maintaining records well, they weren't acquiring them, they weren't holding them, they weren't preserving them, and that they weren't available to the public. They needed a place to make all that happen. Creating the archives in 1978 increased visibility for the archives so the public could use it, accessibility, and offerings to the residents of the neighborhood and the entire region. It's been a very important place. And at the time, it was absolutely what the county was to do. So why do you want to sell it now? Well, why are we recommending that you sell it now, I should say? In 2011, again, when we started this 2.5-year process to thoroughly evaluate with independent professionals what we do with this property, Allegro and their consultants, who were engineers and contractors and experts in all fields, came in and rated every building you own and lease on 21 categories. And unfortunately, the archives in 19 of those 21 categories rated poor or below average condition. It has significant deferred maintenance, inefficient systems, because it just hasn't had a major renovation since 1978. HVAC and humidity control is not sufficient to preserve historic documents. That's something that actually comes from interviews with your staff themselves. The building structure and fire suppression is not sufficient for storage purposes. You have documents in a building that is not ideal for the purpose that it serves. There are ADA compliance issues at the entries and with elevator downtime. It's fairly underutilized. And the current effective occupancy cost for this building, what Allegro realized, is just over $22 per square foot per year. That's in comparison to the style of facility that we're talking about in this consolidation. One of the reasons I wanted to make sure we covered that, where that effective cost of that facility is just over $8 per square foot per year. The $22 number doesn't include cost to upgrade this facility either. It's just maintaining the status quo. The Allegro report concluded then that due to the condition and the renovation challenges that are tied to historic considerations, the most likely disposition strategy would be a donation. Fortunately, your executive, Public Works, didn't agree. They thought there was value in this property, and they wanted to pursue what it could be. A couple of other comments. There's asbestos in the property. That's costly during renovation. And the current facility is no longer optimal, not just for your visitors, but also your own employees. There's limited public interaction and study space. The staff there is small, so there's really no great cost-effective way to create spaces for them or amenities that make their working lives more pleasurable. And the facility itself it's open 4 days a week to the public. It's only 36 hours. Typically gets 5 to 10 visitors a day. So when we went out and we solicited offers, we got in two. And I want to be very clear. And I'm going to draw on the comments of Mr. Marks earlier. Our goal was not to come in and make a political judgment about use. We kind of knew that going into this, there could be some very different uses who looked at this property. And I don't think the county's goal was to make any political judgment. The county wanted to put this building back into service in a way so it didn't sit, so it would remain active. It would benefit the community in some way, shape, or form. And we really evaluated the proposals based upon their ability to acquire the property, renovate it, put it back into service, and provide a use that would be compatible with the community. So you have Welcome House, who offered, at the end, $650,000 price tag in the property, and Fran Development, who offered $725,000. Through the course of proposals and the interviews that we did do with each group, we really realized that both were providing comparable environmental impact considerations with their commitment to green redevelopment. One of the main economic differences between them was the rate at which the county would lease back the properties. Welcome House basically said, your rent's $1 a month for however long you need to stay here. Because remember, the consolidated facility won't be prepared immediately upon the sale. They would have to stay in it for some period of time. Fran Development had suggested, and again, this was not something that was unreasonable, but it was just a higher number, that the leaseback rate would vary from $5,000 to $6,000, effectively covering debt service. At the end, we scored Welcome House, as you heard earlier, 2 points higher, 80 as compared to 78. And there are a couple comments here about financing and typical due diligence period. One of the things that I want to make sure that you hear from us is that we really saw Welcome House as somebody who had been looking in this neighborhood, wanted to provide a service that was not provided, and really demonstrated a passion and immediate reuse and a focus on the property. We very much like the work that Ferran Group does in Ohio City. We love his vision for some of his projects, but the nature of his business is a little different. In the nature of his business, sometimes you can't always put a shovel in the ground the day after somebody moves out of a building. That's just how it is. It's subject to market forces. We are ending up recommending the Welcome House proposal. Once you take into effect the leaseback consideration, the pricing is pretty comparable. Welcome House has an established resume in this field, not only in the service they provide, which they've been doing for over 40 years, but also in the development of properties for the use that's intended here, which they've been doing for a little bit less time. They've got a good track record. In the last 5 years, and I'm talking beginning in the economic downturn and in the most recent 5 years, they've done 3 projects like this. They talked about the one in Lakewood tonight. We thought that was a good track record. Their intended use fills a void for a service offering in the area. We didn't really comment on whether we liked or didn't like that service offering. We just said there's a need here, and they fill it. With limited contingencies and their commitment to close quickly, I want to just reiterate how much they demonstrated their focus on this. This will be its singular goal, as far as we've heard from Welcome House. This facility will be their focus in the coming years. There's limited parking stress in the surrounding area. The nature of their project really demands a long-term ownership. Welcome House won't be developing this property and turning it around or selling it in 5 years, not even 10 years. Welcome House would hold this property for a very, very long time because the nature of their project really demands that they do it for their residents. So you have somebody with a vested interest in that site and that property. There are opportunities for employment and the involvement of the residents because of the nature of the area, small businesses, big institutions in Ohio City. And this had a much higher level of new employment for the area. Welcome House would create about 30 jobs during construction and 55 to 70 full-time positions working at the facility. And that's a lot of people. And those would all be new jobs in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. So, as you alluded to earlier, there was a letter that the Ferran Group had submitted to the county Public Works and Council with their contentions to the scoring process. I'm going to address those contentions here tonight for you. Again, I just want to be clear. We like both groups' vision. This is not a political comment about what they do. This is about the offers that were made. And it's difficult to recreate, standing here August 13th of 2013, a moment in time in the past when information was presented and it was available and the county selection committee had to make a decision. It's sometimes difficult to create that, but we'll tell you what we have. Number one in the letter that was presented by Mr. Ferran, he had added Mr. Charles Bolton to his project team recently, who is a wonderful member of our community. I believe maybe even a descendant of the Rhodes family, if I understand correctly. Unfortunately, this was first communicated to us by an email just under a month ago, already after this announcement had been made public. It wasn't a part of the original proposal to have him on the development team, and it didn't change. It would not have changed our scoring. There seems to be a small misunderstanding on the economics. Number one, as we discussed, the evaluation of offers really has to take into account not only the purchase price, but the cost that the county incurs to lease back the facility over time. So while if you look at the purchase prices, you might see a $75,000 difference, that number ratchets down by $5,000 to $6,000 every single month that the county needs to lease back the facility. There's also a reference to the escrow fund that is created in the Welcome House transaction. And to be fair, in the agenda and in the legislation, this isn't described in thorough detail, but I'll do it here today. This fund is specifically for the purposes of making repairs or improvements to the property that are requested by the county for the purposes of its own occupancy while it stays there before it would move into the central processing facility. This $50,000 fund wasn't established so that Welcome House could have a leg up on having some dollars towards their eventual renovation project. This is only if the county wants to make improvements to the facility. If they don't, that $50,000 goes straight to the county at the end of the project. Or, I'm sorry, at the end of the lease back. It comes out of the escrow and it goes to them. So it has to be included because it was a special part of the transaction that was offered. Fran Group, as you know, it's not typical to have this kind of a fund, but they didn't offer any such fund. So we had to include that as part of the value that was being offered to the county. Going with Fran Group, any such improvements would be an out-of-pocket cost to the county anyway. There is a contention about the financing aspect of the proposal that was made by Fran Group, and this is where it becomes difficult sometimes to recreate a history. The original comment that the selection committee made when they first evaluated these proposals was accurate. At that time, we were not provided any letters from any banks. During the final scoring, we left that comment unchanged, but for a different reason. The one letter that was presented was from Liberty Bank. For a number of reasons, it was discounted by the committee. It expired during the prior month. It included a contingency about an unknown unrelated property, and it actually was not sufficient for the amount of money that Fran Group indicated in their proposal they would need to have debt on in order to do their project. It was about $600,000 shy. So it was discounted just a bit by the committee at that time. The letter from First Merit, on the other hand, was dated and not provided until after the deadline for the revised offer. And as we've discussed before, when we talked about the headquarters project and the Ameritrust project, that selection committee has to make a decision at the time that deadlines are set. We told everybody going into presentations, you cannot provide new information, because we have to make sure that everybody's put on a fair and level playing field. If you bring new information to a presentation that happens weeks down the road, well, then you're essentially changing your proposal again. So we had to discount that letter because of the process of Public Works. Additionally, there were a couple of comments that were made in the letter from Mr. Ferran. And I don't think that his passion for Ohio City is unfounded. It's a wonderful place. He's trying to get a number of projects off the ground there. His first statement was that Franklin Avenue has historically been a residential neighborhood. And while that's not inaccurate, the archive site itself has historically been an integral part of that neighborhood. Apparently the residents love it. And it has acted at the same time for 100 years as a point of delivery for social and community services, all the while being adored and recognized by the residents in that neighborhood. The immediately surrounding area is not just residential. It's Lutheran Hospital, it's the Ohio City Farms, it's a number of restaurants, it's a number of small businesses. We're gonna see Skylight Financial move over into that neighborhood, which is a huge coup for Ohio City. The beauty of the neighborhood is that it is and always has been an ever-evolving mixed-use environment, not just residential. My wife and I dedicated ourselves to Cleveland a long time ago, and I'll tell you that Ohio City wouldn't be interesting to us as a neighborhood to live, work, play in if it weren't mixed use. That's the draw. There was a comment in the Fran Group letter that said presentation was not as solid and then added as proposal. I want to be clear that both groups had good proposals. The comment here was made as a comparison between the two bidders. It was not you came in and did a presentation, but it just wasn't as good as your proposal. It was that Welcome House really came in and knocked the selection committee's socks off with their presentation, with their passion, with their information, with their demonstration of work that they've done in recent years. And the last thing, pictures of photos. Mr. Fran made a comment that pictures of photos in his proposal were of recent projects that they had gotten done. And I believe that those three words were underlined in the letter. And again, I've said it a few times already. We love the vision that he has. It's just that the nature of Mr. Fran's business is that it is subject to market forces. The county loves the vision that he has. But the examples that the Fran Group presented did not provide the same confidence about the completion and timing of the redevelopment of this building. Cuyahoga County is very sensitive that this property shouldn't sit, it shouldn't languish, it shouldn't get stalled in development. In fact, I believe that if I could have as good of a memory as I sometimes think I do, when I made our bidder conference speech back on July 23rd of 2012, we talked about the various buildings that were up for sale. And we made a very clear comment that of those buildings, Ameritrust and the county archives were high on the list in terms of how the county emotionally felt about them. Because they're great old buildings. They don't want to see them sit. The examples presented by Fran Group were South Park Row, which was a wonderful project. It was done 10 years ago during the housing boom. But unfortunately, the other three examples and the pictures that were presented, one was of a small redevelopment of a church building for commercial use, and two were of projects that were started in 2006 and really haven't come to fruition. I know that they're in the process of getting financing finalized. They're complex projects, and we've had a huge economic downturn. So that is not a statement about the ability of Fran Group to develop. That is a statement about the nature of what they do and the fact that it can be challenging to get these projects off the ground. But between the West 25th Street lofts in Ohio City and the cliffs on Rocky River, there's over 100 units of development that Fran Group is currently working on trying to put together and make a reality. We applaud them for it. We can't wait for it to happen. But when you make the comparison that the Welcome House Group had gotten into a meeting with us and came forward with demonstrated evidence about the 3 facilities they built in the last 5 years and the positive impact they had, we had to compare the two on the merit of that. So that's my presentation. I'm very pleased with the timing I made, but I do welcome your questions because I assume you may have some.
Well, we haven't had discussions yet.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So the issue is the two things we have before us. Do we vote to sell the archives, and do we vote to enter into the lease agreement for the Halley Building Warehouse? And I appreciate comments from everyone before we take a vote. And does anybody want to start, or Mr. Schran?
Just a couple quick questions on the monthly rental. You kind of went over that concept that it's $1 versus a $5,000 to $6,000. How many months would you anticipate that the Halley Building would take that we would be potentially at the advantage of the $1 versus the $5,000 to $6,000 comparison?
The middle number is 12 months, 1 year. There is an opportunity at the Halley Building that it could be a little bit shorter. There is the possibility that it could be a little bit longer. It just depends on how quickly the county, because the county will be managing their own construction of that facility. But the number that we've been evaluating with is roughly 12 months.
Okay, so that's where that $75,000 goes away pretty quickly. That differential. If you go under the bump, if you bump under the 12 months side of the aisle.
Yes, and even if you're at 9, 10, 11 months, the delta does get reduced by a significant amount.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going now. Any other questions?
I do.
Yes, Mr. Miller and Mr. Greenspan.
I have 2 questions, one on each project. And regarding the archives Welcome House proposal, my question is, well, I'd actually ask about both proposals. I understand that as far as your formal process is concerned, you could only deal with the information that you had until the cutoff date. But my question is, as to relates to all of the information that you have on both projects as of today, my question is to evaluate each proposal in terms of to what extent is their financing in place, solid, and ready to go.
So it's a great question, by the way. One thing that I want to say is that, to be fair, the Welcome House has had the benefit of, for a couple of months now, working with us on the legal contracts and the documentation and understanding that this was a very real possibility that they'd be here today. So they've put in a lot of legwork in recent months, specifically to that end. Fran Group, at the same time, has not been negotiating the contract with us. We've been working on getting that paperwork finalized. So to be fair to the Fran Group, they are probably not as far along as Welcome House is in the process of financing, but I would not expect them to be. I would tell you that based upon the information that we had when both parties were at an equal point, even after the deadline for the revised offers, I believe that Welcome House was further ahead. I don't know if that answered it well for you, sorry.
Madam Chair, my question is more in terms of how much they had accomplished in terms of the necessary support from outside funding sources as opposed to the question of getting paperwork completed.
So Welcome House has been working with various agencies. You know, one of the interesting things about their offer is that they're not really focused on HUD as being a primary source of funds. Welcome House has some significant donors who support their mission and provides funds that they can apply, but they also have financing vehicles. They're going to go for conventional loan on this project and use the other financing vehicles that they have, especially their private donors, to enhance that. So we feel that while they do need to get that paperwork finalized and a commitment on the property is really necessary to finalize financing, it always is, that they will be ready.
And Madam Chair, my question on the second project is that the council president and I and a few others had an opportunity a couple months ago to have a meeting over at the Halley Building, and based on the conditions that we saw, it would be hard for me to think that the maintenance problems were simply a matter of miscommunication, and I would like if you could elaborate further on what the basis is for your confidence that I don't currently share, that if we move forward on this, that the owner is going to be effective, responsible, and responsive to the facility's needs at this location.
Another good question, and really the biggest concern that we as the selection committee shared going into the process when we realized who our shortlist was and the feedback that we had heard internally within the county. I'm going to touch on this communication issue because I don't think that we can minimize it. It's been very difficult, and it's been going both ways. The Board of Elections and the Job and Family Services group that are currently in the building have a number of people who interact with Greystone Properties every day. Oftentimes, maintenance issues in the past have not been communicated well. It's literally, there are anecdotes such as John Doe running into a facility person, a maintenance person from Greystone, who communicates, hey, I need you to go check out a puddle of water that I saw under a window on the far side of the room. And then that person communicating back 2 weeks later, Greystone never did anything about it. And unfortunately, what really needs to happen to make sure that a facility can be maintained and that the owner of it, who's responsible, knows the priority and the issues that are there, they need to have a point of contact who can clearly communicate everything that needs to get done, when it needs to get done, when it's happening. Some of the issues that we found in reviewing with Public Works the maintenance log of the facility, we looked through and we went back and we said, who called when, about what, who did they call, and how was it addressed? So the maintenance calls really range in the categories of, number one, Greystone didn't find out about some issues until they had existed for weeks. So there would have been no way for them to address them. When they found out, they were addressed. Number two, some things have been the fault of the county, just like any other tenant it would be. When you have things that break, when extension cords are put into a plug, overloading it, and there are electrical issues, when a toilet overflows, really all you can ask the landlord to do is come through, fix the electrical issue, make sure that plumbing is working, and move on. Some of the issues actually were already corrected. There was a very interesting report that was done in the last couple of months where there was one item, and this is again just anecdotal, but there was one item in particular that was being raised as a concern as having not been addressed, that was brought to Greystone's attention in November. It had been corrected in November by Greystone. And when it was re-brought up as a concern in the last couple of months, the individual who brought it up hadn't realized that it was ever fixed. And that's partly where Greystone needs to be better too, communicating back how we fix things when we got them done. Because if somebody does make an official claim or maintenance call, but nobody ever gets back to them, how do you ever know that it's been fixed? And we saw that on numerous occasions, that maintenance calls were made, they were addressed, but there wasn't communication back to the county.
Okay, you made your point.
Sorry.
Is there any question?
Basically, average response time, I will tell you from the log, which was verified by the county, 1 day, maybe 2 in some instances.
Okay, Mr. Greenspan.
Great, thank you. I noticed that there was a slide that was presented that showed the rankings or ratings that you did of the archive building. I believe you said it failed 19 of 21, or was poor, or is that correct? Poor, or what are the?
Below average.
Below average. What were the ratings on the Haley building?
I would have to actually go get that for you. I don't know offhand.
I would imagine it couldn't have been much higher.
I don't know.
As a matter of fact, I would suspect, based on the usage of that building, that it was probably significantly less, having toured both facilities and the Haley building multiple times.
Yeah.
I would say to the quality and management of the facility, I don't believe as a responsible landowner you would need to wait for a call to just see some of the basic challenges that building is being undermanaged and under sufficient maintenance protocol. We went over there, the elevator had to be pushed, closed, in order for it to close. We heard stories of issues with water gathering in the well of the elevator.
That was the one that was corrected in November that nobody knew about.
Okay, we've heard stories of bathroom flooding. We've heard stories of stormwater damage to the point where election records were destroyed prior to their mandated end-of-life cycle. Those are issues, obviously, that are inexcusable. You know, there's the phrase, you know, fool me once, shame on me, or shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not willing to take the second shame on this one. So I'm not going to be supporting moving into the Haley building or extending this contract, which then poses a challenge with the sale of the archives, because the two go hand in hand. So I think you can see, regardless of the scoring, and I'd like to go into more depth on the scoring between the others, but I'll defer that to the chair. But whether either one of these two, the Ferran Group or the Welcome House, is even considered as a viable option, there has to be a place for them to go, and I can't support the Haley building as an option.
Mr. Rogers, and then Ms. Conwell.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, it was mentioned during the public comment that that a meeting was to be scheduled with the community regarding the archives facility. I'm just wondering, is that something that we were looking to schedule, to actually have conversations with members of the community around the future of the use of this building? Or
I'm not aware of that meeting, so I did not know.
Bonnie?
I guess I was a little surprised by that comment too, that there was a comment that there was a meeting scheduled that the county didn't show up to. Now, I know I was not invited to a community meeting about the archives property, so I'm not sure who they invited, but it was not me. So,
since this this property is situated in a neighborhood, which is a little different than most of the other properties that we've been dealing with, would we typically hold do some type of outreach to the community to see what they would like to see the building?
Well, I can't speak to the county's typical modus operandi for that kind of a project. I do know the community has held meetings, whether or not the county was in attendance. There was a meeting that was held. I don't know the exact date, again, was not invited, but you had everybody from local residents to Joe Simperman and Eric Webster showing up to talk about the project. And there were people who felt passionately about both sides. So there has been dialogue going on. I don't know to what extent the county, would look at participating in that, but.
Yeah, I guess the question, what we would normally do in a situation like this, I don't know if we ever had a situation like this before. But, you know, we have talked to the members of the CDC in the group, and they are supportive of both proposals. There wasn't any negative support to the proposals.
All right, Mr. Conwell, and then Mr. Strawn.
Well, just one question through the chair. You mentioned about the Greystone addressing issues concerning the fixture of the property. Have they addressed any of these issues since this has come to light with them? Are they currently working on, I know you said it's a communication error, but are they currently trying to address any of these issues? Because I believe the last meeting we had, it was the maintenance issues were still a big.
Yes, and in fact, it's a very good question. Number one, they are addressing them. You know, there's currently roofing contractors over there today. You know, we visited the site. They are proactively and preemptively addressing them. They've shown a real commitment to improve the building now, even though the long-term commitment by the county has not yet been made, to spend dollars now to really start implementing this communication procedure now so that we can streamline that and improve it. And in recent meetings and emails I've seen from the people who work in the building for the county, your contacts with Board of Elections and Job and Family Services, they're giving us sunny skies reports. They're saying, yes, issues are being addressed. Yes, things are being taken care of. You know, a couple of things are in progress, but simply because the projects take a little bit more time. But roof repairs, cleanup, you know, some basic mechanical issues with the elevators. The elevator thing was a very bad perfect storm because I believe maybe one or two broke down all at an important day. But they were addressed and up and running within 24 hours, is my understanding too. And that was substantiated by the residents or the occupants of the building.
And just was wondering, Director Tewin, you appointed a site person to follow up and make sure these things are done?
Our goal in the future, if this is approved, well, even for any processes center, is we would have a one point of contact that we're proposing, a new position that would oversee all of the activities within the processing center. But specifically to address some of the concerns, I had asked the members of the Board of Elections that if they wanted to come and give some input on their feelings about our plans for the facility and how they feel, and maybe can talk specifically about some of the maintenance if you would allow. I think they would be willing to speak.
Just one more thing. So I guess basically my concern is that making you know, it's money on the table now. So just wondering, are these repairs being preempted because they may be a possible sale? And to make sure our interest is that all the repairs that need to be done is before we actually vote on this.
And I think to Ryan's point, I mean, this really highlighted the lack of communication and perhaps the you know, inefficiencies of the communications of the repairs being made. Understanding that we have to work, both parties have to work better at that and have, you know, one line of communications.
Okay, I think do you have any other questions, Ms. Kyle? Mr. Strawn has a quick question because we need to call the roll here.
Just a comment. In regards to the $1, is there a cap on how many months that the buyer would be prepared to leave us in there?
I would have to.
Months is what your anticipation cleanup, but let's assume that that's not the issue.
No, I think that's a 12-month period that you'd be in there because the anticipation is that the facility could be ready as early as 9 or 10.
Is there a cap on the $1? If it took 24 months, if we chose to stay there for 24 months, we would have a sale, we'd have a transaction, we'd have a dollar amount, we would have closed out this transaction.
Yep.
Without necessarily linking it to the second part of the equation. Don't give me where. I'm just just asking whether or not if the buyer would be prepared to say, okay, we've made a decision to move on, because at least my understanding, what your initial preamble was, we were prepared to give this building away. And if we now have a buyer who's willing to pay for it and is willing to say, okay, perhaps it might go to 24 months, then we are not necessarily behooved to where the Halley building would be the solution, but we can actually address the sale of the one.
Current agreement is for up to 12. Buyer certainly wants to use the property for themselves. I don't think that they've demonstrated an unwillingness to look at more time, but
Yeah, I think we
to
have
be
the,
fair-
I think we have the management team right here. We can put them right on the
I want
spot.
to give you the answer right now. It's yes, we would be willing to talk about an extension of that at the same price. Because it's,
I can't agree with the price, so the price is great.
yeah, but the issue for us is that we had negotiated 12 months thinking that was our window. Our window could be longer than that in terms of putting all the funding pieces together that we're applying for right now. So an actual extension could be fine.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, but that disjoins Mr. Greenspan's objection from the sale transaction.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. In terms of the property in Ohio City, it's probably a bit of an occupational hazard as a former Cleveland City councilman, but I would defer to the councilman in the area. No one knows the people of the community who have spent more time thinking about these issues than the councilman has. And so I would defer to the councilman on that particular part of the issue, but this is linked. And I'm have not reached a comfort level on the Halley building.
Councilman Simperman, I believe that he covers that area, and he has expressed support for the project in public meetings, although I don't want to quote him or say anything specific because I don't think he's here today.
I just like to say that I actually agree with Mr. Greenspan on this. I have been asking for a plan for these records at the archives for over 2 years. And as you all know, the history of this county is very near and dear to my heart. I have been asking for a plan, and today was the closest that we've seen to a plan. I am not in favor of selling this archive, not because of the use, because I don't believe that we have a plan to move these items, and I was with the other folks that were at the Halley building. I was not satisfied with that building. There's some pictures that I took that we're circulating up here. The maintenance just did not seem appropriate to me. Now, all of a sudden, you're blaming it on communications. Well, I just was not satisfied with the building. I cannot, in good conscience, vote to place any records there. I believe there was somebody here from the Board of Elections who originally they had some problems, and I'm not sure if they are continue to have problems now, but I can't support either one of these issues.
Would you like to have the representatives from the Board of Elections?
Yeah, I
here
mean,
to
we were
speak?
there, and we were told
Okay.
the elevator didn't work for 2 weeks, and, the bathrooms didn't work, and it looked, I think you can see by the pictures, there's wiring looks terrible. I mean, all the buildings in this county, I just don't see how this is a deal for us.
I am Tony Perlotti, I'm the Deputy Director at the Board of Elections, and this is Sean Webster, our fiscal manager there. So a lot of communications actually go through Sean at the Board of Elections. I'm Tony Perlotti with the Deputy Director at the Board of Elections, and this is Sean Webster. He's our fiscal manager at the Board of Elections. And so as far as communications with the management company, most of those do go through Sean. There may have been times where, yes, employees will see someone who's working in the building and bring something to their attention, and there may be some poor communication through there because it doesn't go through an official chain. There are other times, though, when we do communicate appropriately through emails with the property manager, and sometimes it takes some time for us to get what we need. For example, this past summer, we've had issues with the air conditioning units in the first floor. I don't know how long it ultimately took us to get them repaired. Probably at least a month, if not longer. And so, but we
It took a month for you to get the air conditioning repaired?
I believe the first request for repairs was made in early May, and it wasn't completely resolved until mid-June.
So,
July.
So sometimes it does take longer times for some of the bigger issues with the building. Since we have been working with Public Works, with Bonnie, we have had better interaction with the building owner, but there's still issues that need to be concerned. We do have an issue with water in the building, and there does need to be roof repair. So it was good to hear that they're working on the roof now. It was brought to our attention today by one of our managers that some of the building is coned off, but we didn't know what was going on. So again, that's a communication back to us. So it's good that, I guess, that they're there working, but we would like to know that.
Okay, anything else? Because we're really getting behind the schedule here, and we need to call the roll. I mean, I think water and old records don't seem to blend very well, but.
Well, just one, we do have currently, we're dealing with a complaint. That employee filed an honest complaint with workers' comp regarding work conditions and the health of the building. So Public Works is working with the law department to look into that and research, and everyone is committed to fixing the issues that are there. It's just that these things do need to be addressed, and they are being addressed now. So it's going in the right direction, but it's definitely not there yet.
Okay, so what members of this council have to decide is, do we sell the archives building and do we sell the archives building, which means that we've got to place those records somewhere else. So the two decisions go together.
Madam Chair, I was just wondering, I think Councilman Schramm brought up a good point. There are two different projects. I know what
individually.
I know what the concern is that one is contingent upon the other. But if Welcome House just stood up and said that they were willing to delay, shouldn't that be considered?
That's not sufficient with me. I mean, I just feel these records are too important. I've been asking for a plan, and I've never gotten a plan. I've never gotten a plan. I wish Mr. Gallagher was here. I mean, we went down to Canton or someplace. We've spent a lot of time on this. We have never gotten a plan as to how these records are going to be kept and disposed of. All we're told is, well, we got this other building.
If I may, the last time we met, we talked about the processing center and when how the processing center would work. Ryan just laid out what we're proposing.
That's the closest we've got, which we've been asking
right?
for 2 years.
Right. So I think the plan is becoming very clear on what we're...
Becoming, that is a verb in progress. We have got to make an important decision on a plan that we just got 5 minutes ago.
Well, as now, if part of the plan comes to having the building and laying out how everything would work, we have the vision as far as having a centralized processing center and bringing the files in and how they would work. But until you actually have the building, you can't have all the exact details. So, we're trying to lay out a plan. You're saying that we're not giving you a plan. I think we're trying to lay it out, but we don't know every single detail of the plan until we actually have a building. And I have flow charts, if you would like to see them, on how when an asset comes into the building, how it's going to be processed. I can show that to you if you'd like. But it will be a work in progress, and I don't have all the answers today, and I'm not going to pretend to. But I mean, it's going to be a work in progress.
Madam President.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I'm sensing a strong unreadiness on your part, a feeling that I share, and I'm wondering whether we got to call the roll today. If we call the roll today, if we call the roll and we vote them down, I think it puts us on a difficult track where maybe we just need more time to get some of these things better nailed down, especially on the second one.
All right, is there a motion to move this matter to the regular agenda for, I'm talking about the first item, the sale of the archives. Is there a motion to move this item to the regular agenda for a vote under suspension of the rules?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schron. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Conwell. All right, a vote.
Discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
I believe that we had commitment from the senior management standing here in a public record, on the record, saying that they're willing to extend this. We have a willing buyer at a price for the first item, supported by the local councilman. I don't think that we should lose this opportunity to segregate and separate these two items. If we are now having 24 months, which I didn't hear that commitment, but I heard pretty close to that, and so that gives us, it puts the burden clearly on the folks in the archives. They know that gives them 2 years to work up the plans. They've heard everything, and I think that we do have the ability to separate these two, to move forward with a community commitment out there to the Welcome House folks and get that moving as a legitimate project, which is in the best interest. They can do their planning, scheduling. We all know that watching buildings go forward, that's probably 6 months of architectural renderings and work anyway. So at the very minimum, maybe 12. So I am prepared to support as a separation of these two. That's why I moved and seconded that.
All right. Anything else?
Madam President?
Yes.
Procedurally, am I correct that if an item passes, it's not going to be voted on at tonight's council?
No, it will not.
Okay.
And so as I understand, then we're going to do a roll call vote. A yes vote would be to place it on the agenda for the next meeting of the 27th for adoption under suspension of the rules. A no vote would be to keep it in committee.
Madam President?
Yes.
I just have a question, maybe this is to the law department. If there's been now a proposed amendment to a proposal, the proposal was for 1 year, now there's a verbal amendment to extend, then if that offer is being made to one bidder, then should Mr. Fran not have an equal opportunity to extend or modify his proposal? If we're going to accept amendments, we might as well be fair to both bidders that at least are presented in the proposal. Or not accept either, and it is what it is.
No, the issue is the process under which you're operating under an RFP. You do the evaluations, you have the higher rank, then you negotiate with the higher ranked, and by definition, the negotiations, you could always have one or two. So it's part of that negotiation process that happens after the ranking, and that's what you're doing right here.
So this is appropriate then, as it's been presented?
This is appropriate as part of the negotiations, and on the law department's part, of course, I mean, if the idea is it's 2 years, then we would make sure that the document reflects that before it's signed by the county.
Madam President?
Yes.
I'm hearing it could be extended from 12 to 12 months, but I didn't hear that it could be as long as 24 months. We don't know that. I'm willing to vote yes on the first one to get it to the full council, but I would have to see a lot of progress on the second item by the 27th to vote yes on the 27th. You know, I don't think we can sit around for months and with the one out there and the other one in limbo.
All right, I think we need to call the roll. All right, Madam Clerk. So we understand everybody clear on the vote?
Yes, to put it to the August.
Would be to send it to the regular agenda for adoption under suspension of the rule on the 27th. A no would be not to vote it out of committee.
Mr. Brady? No. Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan? No. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And Ms. Conley?
No. Okay, so the ayes?
6-2-3.
Okay, so the ayes have it, so we'll be on the agenda for a vote on the 27th. All right. The next item is the agreement, the vote on the lease for the Halley Building. Yeah, once again, a yes vote would be to place it on the agenda for the 27th for adoption under suspension of the rules, and a no vote would be to reject the offer and just leave it in committee. Is there any other questions or comments on that? No, we need a motion, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Schron and seconded by Ms. Conwell. Discussion on this.
Madam Chair, my question is on the existing building. If you could answer this question, is it been substantially unoccupied? Or have they lost tenants? I'm just wondering.
The existing Halley Industrial Warehouse?
Correct. I guess here's my point. This resolution is giving the landlord $10 million a lease. So now we're going to be really occupying. I'm just thinking as a matter of economics. You know, you only can improve a building so much with so much income. I'm just wondering if this is the case, that now if the county goes in there, they're going to have substantial amount of money to upgrade the facility.
The county's commitment, as it would be for substantially all of the building, there's that small piece that they may that would be available for a future expansion. The county's commitment allows the owner to finance improvements that it has not been able to do. To this point, the building has been multi-tenant with Iron Mountain, Cuyahoga County, and a company named National Concessions. The county, simply by virtue of the transition of county government, had a period of time where it was month to month, it wasn't able to make a long-term commitment to the building. And, you know, you always have issues trying to reconcile payments. And it's, you know, I keep saying the word communication. But there has been a very big inconsistency for the owner of the building. At the end of the day, I still think it's an owner's responsibility, obviously, to maintain. But you bring up a good point about the wherewithal of an owner to maintain without commitments and the ability to secure financing and the cash flow. This commitment would provide them all of those things on paper, absolutely. And then it's, as Mr. Greenspan indicated and some other folks have expressed, it's a matter then of ensuring that there's follow through, because there have been some challenges in the recent past.
Madam Chair, just one other quick question. Is there, they're willing to sell this at the end at $1. So what I'm wondering is it ever been broached the possibility of the county just buying it? So
Yeah.
that
We talked about that.
We have talked about that. There is an opportunity for the county to buy it earlier, but it wouldn't be for $1, certainly, because the landlord will be investing, you know, along the lines of it's over $3 million in the property in order to improve it for you in the, you know, the coming months. So they can't just invest that and then sell it for $1, but there is that opportunity at a discount off fair market value.
I just like to speak in opposition to this also. As we indicated, I have some pictures that we passed around. I thought the maintenance in this building was very poor. And I cannot see myself voting for the county to enter into a lease agreement with it. And now we understand somebody's suing us because of bad environmental conditions. There was water in the basement, the elevators didn't work. I just can't vote for it. Mr. Greenspan.
Just one question. It appears that this lease would begin June 1 of 2014. Does that mean that our contract currently expires May 31, 2014?
No, your contract actually goes beyond that. We would terminate, it would seamlessly transition, it would end early, and you would go into the new contract for the larger space.
So if this doesn't pass, what's our last date of occupancy under the current contract?
You know, and
basically, how much time do we have to move out?
That's not the Board of Elections, that's the other stuff that we have there. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, the whole
Haley
group is
building
under
lease.
one lease.
Under one lease. So what's the date we'd have to move out?
And
but you're saying it's beyond June 1, 2014?
It is.
Okay.
And I apologize, as simple as a question as that is. I've been doing so much preparing, and I will have to get you that answer.
It's at least
It's not too much further beyond that, because it's only a short-term lease that the county is under, because it's been trying to figure out what to do long-term.
Okay, so it's at least 10 months from today?
It's at least 10 months from today.
Okay, great, thank you.
The June date is based on the improvements that are being made to the building, and when the improvements will be finished for us to be able to go on.
All right, do we, any other questions? A yes vote would be to, well, we need a motion to place it on the agenda for the 27th. We did that, okay, yes, right, I'm sorry, Mr. Sharon and Ms. Conwell. All right, so a yes vote would be to move the item to the agenda for the 27th for adoption or suspension of the rule. A no vote would be to leave it in committee. Madam Clerk, you call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Brady.
No.
Mr. Germana.
yes.
Mr. Schron.
No.
Ms. Conwell.
No.
Mr. Jones.
No.
Mr. Rogers.
No.
Mr. Greenspan.
No.
Mr. Miller.
No.
Ms. Conley. The motion is defeated.
Okay, so this matter will remain in committee. And the other item will be moving forward. Okay, we are a little bit behind schedule, but let's see if we can move ahead before we take a break. I believe that Mr. Applebaum is here to move on to item 5 on the presentation on the Convention Center Hotel project. And we probably need to take a brief break before our executive session. Our other meeting will be starting late, but we've covered a lot of ground. And I would refer all of you to the memo that I sent out regarding some of the basic issues involved in this email I sent yesterday. No, we're waiting for Mr. Applebaum to approach the podium.
Good afternoon. Oh, I'm sorry. I should be spoken to before I speak.
Oh, come on. You're almost like family now. You know, somebody.
That's my concern. No. Good afternoon. I know that the time I was really going to spend on this, we have a little less time, so I have this organized in such a way that it's in two parts, and I think I know from the point of view of the Economic Development Committee what was most important about presenting today, so I'll show you the agenda. What I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the project in general, the scope, the schedule, the sources and uses and funds, and a little bit about governance. And then I do have the information because the actual motion later today is on the first act, which is approval of the going forward with the criteria architect. So I have information about the architect selection there as well. But I think maybe right at the outset, I want to just talk for a second about the scope and then a little bit just about why the importance of the project. I'm going to mention a couple of things, and I think then the county executive will probably want to talk just a little bit about the schedule, the 2016 schedule. So I think we can, he's asked to speak a little bit about that, and he just may have a word or two about that. But let me start out with the scope. Right now, the scope that we are dealing with, we're talking here about a hotel, convention center headquarters hotel, 600 to 650 rooms, up to 600,000 square feet. I believe it'll actually be less than that. Up to 80,000 square feet of meeting room space, which would include a grand ballroom and a junior ballroom. Those dimensions of the grand ballroom would be in the 15 to 20,000 square foot range. The junior ballroom is probably in the 10,000 square foot range. We've talked about 2 levels of underground parking. The first level, which we know is necessary, is 200 parking spaces. The second level, which would be about another 150, is an economic decision as between the hotel, the convention center, but it would be the closest and best in parking necessary for the hotel. We're talking about direct connections to both the convention center and the Global Center for Health Innovation. We're talking about a hotel that has the amenities of a 4-star hotel. Nationally branded convention center, high quality headquarters hotel, a very significant structure, a hub of activity in downtown Cleveland, something that activates the malls, activates the convention center, and is a necessary part to bringing the business and getting the true vision of this convention center going. A little bit of background, and I have forwarded to the clerk at the end of the last Economic Development Committee meeting. We've had a consulting study done, PKF Consultants, which are the group of national experts on doing feasibility analysis. They've done a market study with financial projections. That study was completed. That is a study that is available for you to read. It's a very detailed study.
Excuse me, Mr. Applebaum, each council member does have a copy at their desk right now.
Okay, great. So you'll recognize it by the cover. And that was actually, Positively Cleveland actually donated the funds to do that study. And there's a lot of information in there. 2 things that I'll point out from the study are these 2 graphics. Number 1, our competition. Our competition, every one of our key competitors has at least one convention center hotel with at least 600 rooms. And some of them have multiple hotels with more rooms. This is critical because when a convention comes in, a large convention, they want a large block of rooms, often 500 or more, in a single headquarters hotel. All of our competitors have this, we don't, and that's viewed as essential as part of the overall plan to maximize your convention center. The second thing I'll point out is right now, if we did have, the goal is always for the very large meeting planners that come in, they want to have a 2,000 room block for a major convention. So 2,000 people are coming in 2 years for a convention. We have to find long-term rooms for that many. That is the goal. Read the PKF study as to what the planners look for. Right now, for us to possibly come up with that block, and this is the theoretical way you could do it, and what would be available in the existing hotels and even the newly planned hotels. And as you can see, some of these remedies, a few of these places where they'd put 13 or 14 people, it would not be a very good way to spread out the show. But you can see that even using this conservative analysis and assuming that all these spaces are good spaces, we are at least short by about 500 rooms. And assuming that the headquarters hotel guarantees a block of 80% commitment going forward, it means you need at least a hotel of about 600 to 610 rooms minimum. So that is what the analysis shows if you really want to do this the right way. Before I go into the next graphic, which is the schedule, I'm going to talk about the schedule that we have that we're now working toward to get this done. And this schedule contemplates completion of the hotel by the end of the spring of 2016 with opening events June 1, basically, open for business 2016. I'm going to go through the financial or economic analysis of the amount of money that can be saved by doing that, especially with escalating construction costs. I know the county executive mentioned to me that he'd like to say a few words about this. So,
I would, Madam Chair, and I think I can be very brief, at least compared to Mr. Applebaum.
You got to take on your Frank Jackson mode.
I can't be that brief, or I just say have a good day. But I wanted to go from the viewpoint of an elected official as opposed to the staff and consultants that have worked on this. I had heard some conversations or comments and questions from council members, just how did we get here? And I wanted the council to know from kind of my vantage point, and I think just elected officials in general, how did we get here in some of the conversations that happened behind the scenes that then have led to the presentations that you're getting. And I think it'll answer, at least I know, a couple of your questions. So quickly, before the convention center was ever built, with this whole history of Cleveland trying to compete for conventions, there was always this theme. We were always coming up short for major conventions, and I'm not just talking about the big political conventions, I'm talking about major conventions in general. We were always coming up short because of a lack of hotel space. When the Convention Center and Medical Mart project was originally announced, there had been some preliminary discussions about whether or not a hotel would be included in it, but they could not figure out a way to make the financing work. But they thought that maybe as other property became available, namely the county administration building, maybe someday there would be. But they weren't able to get that done as part of the original package. But there was a lot of discussion about it at that point in time. In 2011, when we started this process that we were talking about earlier today, about selling off some of our properties, consolidating our buildings, we talked about if we could figure out a way to move to a new county administration building, it would free up the current building, and maybe if we put that property on the market, we would actually get a bid for, or a developer come and say they want to build a hotel. So that was discussed, and it was discussed publicly, and I said publicly I hoped that's where the consolidation of buildings would eventually lead to a hotel project, which would make us more competitive and make for gaining conventions and for also making it a viable facility, both the Medical Mart and the Convention Center. And that was in conjunction with a lot of other discussions that all of us had about how to make sure that the Medical Mart was going to be competitive and that the Convention Center was going to be a first-rate facility. After the completion of really the initial phases of the property consolidation, we actually did, as council was informed and as I said publicly, we got an offer or two for the county administration building, but it wasn't a hotel. It was to basically buy up the land and say, well, we'll put a parking garage in there. And we discussed, again, publicly and in council meetings, that was not what we thought was the highest and best purpose of that property, that it would be a shame to say, well, we'll just build a parking garage there. And by the way, we got some commitments, as you all know. Some people said, well, we'll build a parking garage now, and then someday we'll build a parking garage or a hotel on top of the parking garage. I never thought that was a wise route to go because I wasn't sure that was ever really going to happen. So we discussed with our consultants, why didn't we just get kind of A to Z hotel developer come in and say, hey, we heard this property is available. Here's the whole thing. We want to buy this property. We want to develop it. And the answer that came back, again, as we discussed publicly in the council, was that's not really the way the hotel business works. If you just put a property out there like we did all of our other properties, you're not going to have a convention center or a hotel developer come to you and say, yes, I want to buy this. And for complexities within the hotel development world, it wasn't going to work that way. So after that part of the process was over, we pressed kind of the reset button on the eventual destiny of the county administration building site. And we said we were going to have a specific process to see if there could be a convention center hotel that was going to be built there. So this is now going back into 2012. Now, that process began, and then what kind of intervened was as the convention center and medical mart were being completed, we started getting more final statistics about what the surplus was going to be. And I still remember I had the conversation with Jeff Applebaum about just how enormous that surplus was. And that was going to make the possibility of doing a convention center hotel much, much more likely. So then we started to accelerate the whole process. Now, when we first started the process, we first started having discussions, I'm talking about between me and my staff and the consultants, how quickly do we think we could have it done? Because the sooner that we can get the hotel online, the quicker we can compete for conventions. And I understand the conventions that people talk about are the ones we've all heard of, like the big political conventions, but it wasn't a discussion that was just dominated by that, because that's one convention, one time. What we're interested in getting is repeat conventions year after year after year. Not one big party in 2016, but something that's going to recur over and over and over again, to really be a player in the convention center business. But we said, I told my team, let's see if we can do it in 2016. Now, what came back, the original opinion was, that's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to get everything underway in 2016. And I said, well, okay, difficult is okay. Let's see if we can do it. And I challenged them. I said, is there some kind of scenario where we could actually have it all done now that the financing is looking like it's moving along and all these other things? Is there a way to actually get it done in 2016? And the answer that came back, the preliminary answer was yes, but you'd have to start construction pretty much this year, at least demolition this year. And the new county administration building, since that piece is now finalized, that's not going to be complete until next year. So you'd have to do 2 moves. And this is something I probably haven't said publicly before, but I said, well, then forget it. Because there's no way that it's not going to be super expensive to move twice. Now, that was just a layperson's opinion. I mean, I'm not in the construction field. I'm not in the hotel development field. I'm not in the moving business. And I said, my assumption was, well, if you're going to have to move twice, that's going to be prohibitively expensive. But I said, but at least get me the number so that we can quantify it, and I can tell council or anybody who asks, here's why we won't be able to get it done in 2016. One of the biggest surprises I've gotten in my life the last year or so was when they came back and they said, if you crunch the numbers, it is actually cheaper to accelerate the I and do 2 moves because of the cost accelerants of the construction phase. In the construction business, as I guess we all know now, things are either in a descent or an ascent. Right now, they're in an ascent. And so every single year, I think the statistic is, every single year that goes by, your costs are going to escalate by about 3.5%. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but when you're talking about multi-$100-million projects, it very quickly catches up. The other thing that I just want you to know that I did was, we had originally, the in-house opinion was, okay, here are some options how a move would work. And I said, I want you to absolutely minimize any of the expense and maximize our current existing space. I want to lease out as little new space as we possibly can to try to lower the cost of this move even more. I just want to council know, it wasn't until those numbers came back, both the amount of money that would be saved by cutting the cost of construction, by getting the revenue coming in that the new convention center hotel is going to operate, the fact that Mayor Jackson was willing to basically make an agreement with us that follows this whole timeline, where the city of Cleveland has moved quicker than we had a right to expect them to, quite frankly, and the fact that Bonnie and her staff has been able to plot out the way this move would work in a very economical way. It's actually to the point that even if we weren't shooting for some type of 2016 date because we think we're going to be able to be competitive for some big conventions that year, even without that, it makes economic sense because you save the money on the construction side. It wasn't until then that I said, okay, now that makes sense to me. I just wanted the council to know that because we never had an artificial date where we said, hey, it's got to be 2016 come hell or high water. I don't care how much it costs. As a matter of fact, if it was going to be cost prohibitive, I was going to say don't do it. But the fact that, and Jeff will go through the numbers, and I know we've done some of this in committee, but I wanted you to hear that from me directly because I wanted you to know the directions I was giving my team. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
So what you see here is the conceptual schedule. By the way, I am showing the committee as a whole information that I shared in the Economic Development Committee. So this is not new. I'll tell you if there's anything new, trust me. This was the schedule that we put before the committee, and basically it has these elements to it: selection of the criteria architect, selection of the operator brand, selection of the design builder, entering into a cooperative agreement with the city and the port, and issuance of the certificates of participation, which are really the bonds. Now, I'm going to come back through that in a second. What I wanted to do, though, is show you a comparison between that schedule and, frankly, this is what's down below is the original schedule that I actually showed to the county executive. The original schedule I showed to the county executive before we did this, and you can see where the date moved out to on the right. The difference in these schedules, and we had a couple of consultants, because this is not my opinion, this is the opinion of several folks in the industry who've looked at this. They've told us, and by the way, the schedule, the older schedule would have pushed out 10 more months. We could have pushed it out another year, but this assumes 10 months because there's a trade-off. If we push it out, this schedule says as soon as in the old schedule, as soon as we naturally would have gotten out of the building, we would have started to abate, demolish, excavate. What would have occurred is we would have had more winter work, so there had been winter weather in an additional month of winter weather at a critical point in time, and also a bad month during the while we were in closing. Now, we could have eliminated that winter weather by actually just delaying the project 2 more months and having exactly the same schedule we have this year, but a year later. Then it would line up exactly the same, but you'd have more delay cost. But assuming that we started it out as soon as we could with the natural demolition, here's what you have. You have about $1 million of additional winter weather work. Now, here is a number, and I'm really getting nervous about this number, because a year ago, when I was doing cost numbers, we were putting 3% construction cost escalation into all of our numbers. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, that way we were actually the reverse. Costs were going down. A year ago, we were about 3%. Several months ago, some of the constructors went up to 3.5% to 4%. I conservatively moved this up to 3.5%. I will tell you that as of last week, if you take a look at the new trend number and what people are now putting into numbers, it's 4.4% on construction escalation. That's kind of where we are. Now, that may moderate a little bit, but if we simply assumed 3.5% escalation, 10 months of escalation for the project, somewhere around $200 million of the cost is subject to escalation, you'd have a number of about $5.8 million in construction escalation. And by the way, the major national constructor that looked at this thought the number would be more like $7 million. They escalated more than I'm escalating, but that was still based on a 4% number. If right now we took just what I'm escalating and used the 4.4% escalation, it's already up to $7.3 million. So getting it done a year earlier or 10 months earlier, in this case, is going to save you somewhere between, let's say, $5 and $7 or $8 million bucks. You could eliminate the $1 million of winter protection by pushing the project back another month, but then 2 months, then you have another 2 months of escalation. Extended soft costs, if we push the project out and it takes longer, you're going to have more soft costs because we'd use the time and we have more design time, people would be on board longer, so there would be a natural extension of soft costs. One funny thing is when you do a project faster, all of your, I have to admit, all the architects, all the engineers, all the consultants, everybody in there, they do their work in a faster time frame. There's less money, they make less money because a lot of this is just the amount of time you're on the project. Lost, at the bottom line in our revenue model, we do believe, the hotel brings in revenue, and we believe it brings in revenue ahead of debt service. Being very conservative, we think that's to get done a year early or 10 months early and to get online saves about $800,000. I haven't even calculated the lost convention center revenue business. Obviously, the whole reason that we're getting this done and want to get it done as soon as possible is to bring in more business. I have not calculated how much additional business we will have in the convention center. We can ask Dave Gilbert for that number, but I won't speculate as to what that is. But we know that we're turning down convention center business because we don't have it right now. And then financing costs. Unfortunately, financing costs, interest rates are going up also. So, and unless they turn around and go back the other way, the sooner we do this, the more we're going to probably save in terms of financing costs. There's some desire to get this done sooner rather than later because we're concerned that interest rates will continue to rise. Against the savings, there's the cost of the double move. Now, in the Economic Development Committee, Bonnie came forward and she showed her numbers, and these are not my numbers, they're hers. This is what she estimated as the cost of the double move. She's here to answer questions, but it was about $1.142 million. And this was presented in some detail to the Economic Development Committee. So that is the cost side. And I'm going to ask council at this point in time, because I started about 40 minutes late. I was going to go through a little bit more for the public of the rest of the project. What would you like me to take 10 minutes to go through the rest of this, or what would you like me to do? Because it's already 4 o'clock.
It's up to other members. Some of us are on the Economic Development Committee, and we've been here, and so we've heard a great deal of this. If anybody has specific questions,
I can do this in very short, just kind of whip through what the slides would be, then ask for questions. But or it's up to you, however you want me to do it.
It's for. Why don't you do it if you can do it like really quick, the Cliff Note.
All right, I'm just going to, here's the fast Clip Note version. Because I was so offended by the county executive saying it takes me so long to say things, I'll say this all in about, like 30 seconds. So, but let me turn off we're in the process right now. So today, I believe you voted out of your committee the criteria architect, which is simply approving the criteria architect to start work under a short form contract that will take about the first 90 days while we negotiate the full services contract with the criteria architect. The design builder, the RFQs were issued on 8/5. We actually had the pre-qualification conference today. We intend to have the design builder, the proposals basically, we'll do a shortlist process, RFQ, RFP, proposals in by the 3rd week of September, interviews the end of September. We want to have the design builder on board by the 1st of October. And we would intend to come back to you on or about the 1st of October with authorization to proceed with the design builder. And I believe that's a Tuesday. I'm not sure if that's the exact date, but that's about the time frame that we'd want to come back to council on the design build selection, or at least a committee on the design build selection. The operator, this is the brand. This is the operator brand, the national brand. We are in the process right now of selecting the operator for recommendation to council. So we shortlisted. We have 6 national players that would love to be the operator of this hotel, 6 brands. We interviewed last week. We're in the process of pouring through the information. We are contacting a short list. We're having some additional interview sessions, and we hope to be in a position to make a recommendation on whose brand this will be and who will operate this hotel by next week. We then will be coming back. We have some negotiations and preliminary discussions, but we hope to come back the 1st week of September with our recommendation as to who the brand will be for this hotel. I'm going to skip the design review process. I want to talk about money for a second. We have a model for the sources and uses of funds. This gets into how it is paid for. The bonds or certificates of participation are funded by various sources, but they include sources that all exist. This is no new taxes, no new source of revenue. We're just harvesting the revenues generated by the hotel itself, the bed tax generated by the hotel itself. There is going to be a sales tax exemption, and we're taking part of the revenue, the safe part of the revenue stream generated by the hotel itself, and reinvesting that in the hotel. So here you have your uses and sources. This is a little more complicated than 2 minutes, but pardon?
You haven't ever said anything in 2 minutes, have you?
You're right. But I've been through this with the
I'm going to ask your wife,
committee.
did you say I do in 2 minutes?
Pardon?
I'm going to ask your wife, did you say I do in 2 minutes?
My recommendation to you is not to talk to my wife about it. That would be a mistake. She doesn't even know I'm doing this hotel project. If I told her, she'd kill me. In any event, the hotel, I did want to get to this point. On the hotel revenue part, this is the economics, essentially, of the revenue generated by the hotel that helps pay for the bonds. We believe that the total revenue that will be generated per year will be about $45 million. $26 million per year from room revenue, about $19 million from other revenue like food and beverage, et cetera. We believe that, and I'll tell you why we believe this, that the actual cost on an annual basis of running the hotel, paying all the fees associated with the hotel, paying everybody, in other words, every cost, the fee, what the hotel operator takes out is about $37 million a year. This is very conservative, by the way. We believe that the net income on an annual basis will be a minimum of $8 million a year. We actually think it'll be higher than that. But in our model, these are all conservative numbers, and it's that $8 million a year that is part of the debt service, pays for part of the debt service. I will tell you that the PKF report supports this, which is conservative. Every pro forma we've received from every hotel operator actually fairly significantly is in excess of that. In essence, what it means is that the income from the hotel project pays for 40% of the construction cost. So all of our subsidy is in the construction cost. Once it starts to operate, then it's self-sustaining and probably should actually generate revenue. And by the way, this is after you take out money for capital repair, you take out money for all the reserves, because it's a county building. We want the building to be maintained in a first-class, state-of-the-art way. It's an asset that the county owns. So that's a little bit about the revenue side on debt service.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
Yes.
What do you project the annual debt service to be? I think I asked that question.
Yeah, and I actually have the slide on that. I can bring that up for you. It was like the only slide I took out to try to shorten this thing. I'll get that number for you. I don't want to misquote it. But I have that. It was actually in a slide I presented to your committee, but I don't want to misquote the number. But I have that for you, and I'll give it to you. Just a word on governance. Obviously, what we are doing, we have to do a deal. We have to have a cooperative agreement. The cooperative agreement involves the city, and it involves the port. And we've had preliminary conversations with them. They're all in tune with doing this. But in this cooperative agreement, in order to take advantage of what each has to offer, the county agrees to transfer the administration building to the city because the city has to have it to support the tax increment financing. The city then transfers the property to the port because that is what we need for the cooperative financing plan. The port then agrees to lease the property to the county in conjunction with financing, and we get a license to actually construct the project. And ultimately, the county's transfer of its interest to the administration building property allows us to issue these certificates of participation. Ultimately, what happens is by working through the port, we can issue the bonds. In essence, we can take advantage of the TIF and the other forms of financing. They grant back to us all the rights to operate, to own, to operate, or I should say to operate the hotel, to generate the revenues from the hotel, and it really is the county's building worked through a collaborative or cooperative agreement with the port in the city. The city's also agreed to participate. There's $8 million that they're putting into this project. as part of their contribution, along with their participation in the TIF, and they're also giving all of the bed tax generated by this project comes back to the county for use in the financing of the project. So that's essentially the contributions of the various parties. The only other thing I'll talk about now is the timetable. We believe that we'll be back to you with the elements of a cooperative agreement probably sometime in September to talk through that with you. We think the City Council is going to have to consider a transfer of land from the county to the port sometime in September. They're going to have to consider a tax incremental finance legislation sometime in October. We're going to have to consider legislation to authorize all these financing arrangements in November. We're all going to be developing the documentation for the financing arrangements in December. All the work with the credit agencies takes place in January and February, and the bonds are issued early in the spring. So that's part of the timeline. We will do the preliminary work, the abatement of the building, the demolition of the building, early packages for which we have cash in November, December, January. The design builder will be doing early packages. We'll have the GMP and the final guarantee of the project sometime between January and March. The final guaranteed maximum price is entered into in March. The bonds are issued, and we start foundations in April. Very similar, by the way, to the way that we did the Convention Center and Medical Mart project. So that's a little bit about timing. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, one of the issues that I discussed or was concerned about is I wanted to get a feeling from council as to the number of moves. So one of the key operatives here is sort of a condition precedent, is the one of the two moves. And in my position is, it's a lot of things to consider. We have a dollar figure, but there are also intangibles that we can't take into consideration. The loss of productivity, the inconvenience to the public, the loss of time for our staff in terms of the move. And then, anytime you move, there's always some hidden factors here. So I just like to, I think everybody knows the options. I'd like to just get a feel from council. Are they inclined to go with one or two moves? Yes.
I think it's very succinct to boil it down to just that one or two move thing, but I think we need to look at the totality of what's going on here, because I think you're right that there is a $5 to $7 million just pure cash savings by moving on this project early. I think that it also says a statement to the world that we are now a first-class convention center 10 months ahead of what we're going to be able to make that statement out there. A meeting planner, somebody said, well, meeting planners can't forecast moving into a hotel before it's done, and they do it all the time. I personally made the decision to move in on the west, even though we knew the Westin Hotel wasn't done, but it will be done in time for our 2015 convention. So having sat and made that decision, it's done all the time. I think that we're going to be seen as how we're really moving in the game. And just to give you I know we didn't get a forecast from the Convention Bureau, but if you figure that 10 months early and you get 2 conventions out of that in the 10 months per month, the average convention is going to run between $2 to $4 million. Putting that in dollars value to this region, we're looking at between $40 and $80 million if it follows even that norm as far as its economic impact on what goes on, because I know our convention's coming in the $4 million range, and it was we didn't even take up the whole convention center. So bottom line, when we look at it, one move or two moves, when we come back and look at a 6-month project and we measure it against a 25 or 30 year, this 6 months, I know it seems important at this very moment, but I think it's going to be pretty minuscule when we look at the total package. So I'm in favor of the 2 moves and get moving.
Yes, Mr. Brady?
There's no question that it's going to be inconvenient and kind of hectic making 2 moves, but I agree with Councilman Schron. I sort of view this, without being obviously an expert in these areas, as I'm going to drive I-90 to Chicago. And, I think it's going to take me, I estimate I can get there in 7 hours. I'm not sure, how could I be that we will be able to meet all these deadlines. I don't know whether my car is going to break down. I don't know whether something will happen on the highway that'll prevent a problem. I don't know if the weather would, something would happen. But
State trooper.
But I don't see a state trooper, right? Well, I'll try to drive appropriately. Figure that in. But I don't see anything lost in trying, and so I think that we should go ahead and try. If we end up if this ends up not coming in exactly when we would wish it would, it'll still come in early. And so I think it's worth it, and I think it's something that I'm willing to go through the 2 moves to attempt to accomplish.
Mr. Germano?
I just can tell you that, in my career with insurance, I run across this a lot of times. Where people didn't plan to do it this way, but a house sells, a house doesn't sell, they're going to build, they're waiting to sell, or they got this opportunity to get a great house and then they're stuck with 2. It all boils down to opportunity, and if the opportunity is there and if it's worthwhile, it's not going to be convenient. But so I'm in favor because I think all of the statistics tell us that we probably should move forward.
All right, so you have the 2 moves. All right, anybody else? Mr. Miller?
Madam President, I'm in the same camp. It's going to cause a whole lot of trouble and inconvenience more for the administration than for us, and I wouldn't be surprised if they would have said, well, we've already got enough on our plate, but if they can do it, we can do it. So I'm a yes as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Greenspan?
Yeah, I think larger looking at the economics of the components, I think we still need to understand the debt service, because that's going to be a component of what our true savings, if there will be any savings. Just kind of the debt we're looking at, the $206 million or whatever that is that a 20-year debt, sir? 20 years? Is that what we're looking to do?
Part of it is actually, this is why I want to pull up a slide. Part of it's actually 15 years and part of it's 30 years. It changes.
Okay.
Because, and let me...
I couldn't find it in the package.
I'll find it. Let me explain it. Because keep in mind that what happens is between now, there's 15 years left on the sales tax and the 1% increase in the hotel tax. That's what's left over from the convention center financing package. So that goes on for 15 years. And then when that is over, you have a remaining time period where that's no longer part of the package. At that point in time, you continue, though, to have the revenue stream, because that goes on. So my recollection, and I'll pull it up, but there's 2 different numbers because it changes.
Yeah, actually, it looks like it was here. So now that I see it,
did you
are
find
you
it?
saying it's $16 million a year debt service through 2027, and then $10 million?
Yeah, I was thinking 17 and 10, but 16 and 10. That's
So if we're
correct.
only getting $8 million in net income off the project, and we've got $16 million in debt, where's the profitability come into play?
Well, what happens here is the hotel itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, keep in mind the reason that we're doing this. The hotel itself, what we are saying is that the hotel operations themselves generates $8 million for the model. Now, there's actually there's additional contingency there. But at that point in time, the hotel operator, all costs have paid, all expenses are paid. I mean, this is not being done so that the county necessarily generates profit. This is being done so that the operator stays there. We have a first-class state-of-the-art hotel, and the operators have all said so far that all of their models, they are satisfied, and they're incentivized, by the way. They have a set amount that they receive, and I want to get into negotiations with them, and then their incentive is only the additional fees that they're going to receive are only after
I understand
that money comes back to us.
I guess my question is, if the casino spins off 8 in profit for debt service, and the debt service is more than that, the county's then responsible for the delta. How are we making up that difference? I understand the economics and the multipliers and how it factors through and helps the economy, but at the end of the day, we've got to pay the bill, and I'm trying to understand the economics of how we come up with the delta between the income we receive from the hotel and the.
Well, the idea is that there's sufficient revenue that comes from the hotel. There's not going to be a delta. I mean, we've taken a piece of the hotel revenue. We've taken basically 17% of the revenue generated. The part of the revenue we need for debt service to make ourselves completely whole is only 17% of the revenue. So now the rest of that revenue has to go to hotel operations, and it goes to the brand.
I'm just looking at your slide where you've got $45 million in total revenue, $37 million in total operating costs and reserves. It leaves an $8 million net income number.
That's using a conservative model. We in other words, we believe there's going to be more than 45, et cetera. But what we're saying is, under the conservative model, that's where the $8 million for debt service comes out of the hotel revenue generation.
I understand, but if our debt service is $16 million, where's the other 8 coming from?
Oh, I'm sorry. That comes from all the other sources. That comes from.
That's what I was trying to
No,
understand.
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry. Oh, here, I have that.
We were supposed to be focused on 1 or 2 moves here, so.
No,
and we need about half an hour for
but I don't have
executive
enough-
session, so.
All right, well, I don't have enough information to
I
make
completely misunderstood, and I follow what you're asking here. Hold on. Here it is. Here's the annual. So right now, what we're saying is, this could vary. So I think you saw on that chart 207. We're saying it'd be between 200 and 220. So the $8 million is from the hotel. The project-specific hotel occupancy tax is $1.8 million, and that is the bed tax, the city and the county, just the bed tax generated by the hotel. It goes back into debt service. That's $1.8 million. The project-specific non-school property tax, that is the TIF, and that is $750,000 a year. And then through 2027, to get to the $17 million number, this is the residual revenue from the sales tax, the 1% bond tax, and the Positively Cleveland contribution. That's the 6.25. So that's the difference. I'm sorry.
So that's assuming that the 2.8 to 3% increase in tax revenue, and that's the delta on that, correct?
Say that again.
Because
I'm sorry.
there's the 0.25% income sales tax covers the convention center debt. And there was a projection that number would generate $45 million a year. So you're saying the excess, because sales tax numbers have been trending higher, the excess in that initial debt service for the convention center will cover this number?
Yeah, this actually is very conservatively done. This does not even assume trending higher.
Trend's flat, though.
Yeah,
but we've been trending up, so now you're trending up, trending flat.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So you have flavor 1 or 2 moves.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm challenged on the 2-move concept, so I would be in the 1-move category.
Okay. All right, anybody, Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. Jeff, 2 weeks ago, I attended the Greater Cleveland Partnership's Economic Inclusion Subcommittee meeting, and in that meeting, there was a roughly 30 stakeholders across the county in the area of economic inclusion. The 4 large participants were private sector participants were the University Hospital, Cleveland Clinic, Dominion, and the Regional Sewer District. And I was encouraged because they talked about supporting, creating CBAs for specific projects. And I said, oh, we've already done that. We did with our Geist project.
You know, Mr. Jones, I don't want to cut you off, but we are on a really tight schedule, and we're trying to kind of get a consensus on this move thing because we really got to move on. So if you could get to the question.
Story short, I'd like to have a dialogue with you maybe at a later time about, since we have an accelerated time for our project, I would like to talk about when we need to start discussing the economic inclusion elements of this project.
It's a very, very important issue, but not right now.
Yeah, by the way, just to tell you two things, the answer is now.
Yeah.
And when we had the design builders come in today, in the pre-conference, we stated the following. We said, at a minimum, we will have at least all of the goals and requirements we had on the Medical Martin Convention Center project, but I also said, all of you need to be prepared and to indicate your willingness to enter into whatever community benefits agreement or package that, as a policy matter, the county decides. Now, this is to a large extent, it's something that I can facilitate, but it's your policy decisions on how this is done. They all understand that, so that's a dialogue that needs to occur along with all our other dialogues right now.
Okay. 1 or 2 moves, Mr. Jones.
I didn't hear you.
1 or 2 moves.
I support 2 moves.
Okay. Okay, anybody else want to be heard? I mean, we're just kind of taking a start. I'm kind of like, I'll do the 2 moves as you break my arm. I'm really.
Which one do you write?
Yeah, I'm really concerned about, that we can do this, but I'll go along with it. Anything else on this part of the discussion? Anything else on the update from Mr. Applebaum?
Madam President?
Yes.
I'm not on council, but I just want to say one thing. I just wanted to let you know, when it comes to the effect on our customers, our consumers, we really are putting a lot of thought into that, try to make it. I mean, look, we can put up with the disruption, and we'll try to make sure it doesn't affect our productivity. But in terms of the way that the citizens of Cuyahoga County are going to be affected, we really are trying to make that a priority to make sure that that's minimized. I mean, trust me, it wasn't like we said, oh, good, we get to move twice. I mean, we didn't want to do it either. It's just that the numbers, I think, are so compelling that we're willing to try to make that kind of sacrifice. But I understand what you're saying completely, and we will be open to any suggestions about how to minimize any possible disruption. I just want you to know we're not cavalier about those things. I share that.
Okay, yes.
We know where, has Bonnie come up with a plan of where the services for the constituents will be?
We don't need to talk about that, but that's available. We can talk to you about that later on. But yeah, she's discussed some of that with us. There's a use of some existing buildings and rental of some others. And I think we actually had the contract with, I forget the name of is a CBRE that is investigating rental spaces for us. So yeah, that part is in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Applebaum? All right, thank you very much. You set a record for us today. Do we need to take a break before we go into executive session? We need about a half an hour for executive session, or can we, 5 minutes, really quick? 5 minutes. Okay. I know, it's.